Good morning. Good morning, thanks. I'm Joe Princiota. I'm an Alaskan, and I'm also a crime scene investigator. Since my father's an artist and there's art in me, I'm really an artist at heart. I approach life that way, but I have an engineering background, and I love to talk. So the attorneys liked the fact that I could build rather skillful and accurate models. In those days, the computers were just coming into 3D. Now I use the computers quite a lot and do my modeling in the computer. But I produce models that would help the attorney tell their story to the jury. To do that, I have to go to often the crime scene. I do a lot of criminal defense work. I kept a second apartment in Las Vegas for 14 years, doing a good deal of criminal defense and what we call slip and fall. People who got injured at the hotel were suing the hotel, needed to make an exhibit of how they got injured. So my career has been on artistic communication, World's Fair communication, courtroom communication, and so a lot of crime scene investigation. So when the situation with 9/11 came about, I was fascinated by the first shock of what really was America's shock and awe. And I was overwhelmed. And I didn't like what I saw from an emotional standpoint and from a scientific standpoint, from just the physics of watching the pulverization of these buildings. And I had done many cases where steel workers had been injured because during the assembly of a building, for some reason, a purlin, a beam, a column had failed, or the workers' support area had failed, or on one of the oil rigs, there was a badly designed crane, and when it swung around, the weight on the other side of the crane swung over the handrail, and in our particular case, our man got crushed by this movement. So I was a little familiar with steel, a little familiar with building construction, a lot and too much familiar with how people die and what happens to the body. And another job my mother had there in Anchorage, Alaska, was she was coroner. So I've personally been to autopsies and all of this. As the news of 9/11 came in, the structural failure of the buildings became more odd and curious to me. And so I began to look. The French gentleman who had the Search for the Boeing page with the Pentagon really impressed me that something was wrong with the story. It was later that the fact that two cousins had both firefighters, and that's that's my cousin Vincent Princiota and my cousin Sal Joseph Princiota, were both firefighters. And as a result of the issue of 9/11 on the day, Vincent had died in the South Tower with other firefighters. The firefighters lost 343 firefighters that day. Sal came to the scene late because of another assignment, and he wasn't trapped in any of the buildings. But he, as you can tell, was a bit of a bodybuilder and attacked the pile. With strength, with vigor, and without stopping. And as a result, he must have inhaled quite a volume of this extremely toxic powder. Often I counsel different individuals who are part of the 9/11 Truth Movement, as I am part of the Truth Movement, but I am independent of any organization. I work closely with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. And I recommend anyone who wants to know more about this issue, that's a good place to start. Another page is just 911truth.org, but AE911truth.org will get you to architects, engineers, scientists who, like myself, have to testify in court about their expert opinion about something. And so they approach the issue of 911 with the same scientific approach. But my website is just CSI911.info. I offer information. And I say I counsel some of the Truth Movement folks because with those connections, I'm in communication with a lot of folks. And I say, This is a passionate issue. We all have an idea about who did it. We all want to solve the crime. But please be careful how you speak about 911 because you can also be misled by words you've been given and you've accepted them, and one of them is dust. The buildings did not collapse into dust. Dust happens. There's dust in this room. Dust is natural. These buildings collapsed into powder. The people became powder. Powder is manufactured. These buildings did not collapse into their own footprint. These buildings powdered, pulverized, and moved outward in an explosive demolition, destruction. In addition to the Twin Towers, there's of course Building 7, with a model of which I don't have here with me today, and I apologize for that. Building 7, this is the 44th and 45th floor of these towers, was 47 stories high and collapsed later on in the afternoon after never being hit by any airplane, a few small fires. That's a building that collapsed into its own footprint. The north wall moved south. The south wall moved north. The east wall moved west. And yes, the west wall moved east. It closed like a cardboard box, sealing into itself all of its contents. And what did it contain? It contained massive amounts of evidence in several major trials that were about to begin or were at that moment ongoing. Trials of Securities and Exchange, trials regarding FBI investigations, trial involving Enron and the Enron crime against California and other places. So that sealing up of that building at free fall acceleration. Free fall is not a speed. Free fall is not a speed. Free fall is an acceleration. Use that word. Don't use dust. Use powder. It was powdered. But Building 7 was a classic controlled demolition. Building Tower 1 and Tower 2 were planned demolition. But don't use the word controlled, I suggest, because it was out of control. It was overdone. It was a real crime not done by professionals. Building 7 was a controlled demolition, clearly pre-planned, falling at free fall acceleration, faster and faster and faster during its first 100 feet. Just a classic, blowing out from underneath, somewhere out of camera, the supports sufficient to allow the building to accelerate. And that's what free fall is. It's free fall acceleration, which cannot be achieved unless there's nothing underneath the falling object. As a person is when they fall out of an airplane, by design hopefully with a parachute, they go faster and faster and faster until one of two things happens. Either their clothing forms enough resistance that they've reached terminal velocity, which in the case of if you don't have a parachute, that's what it is. But if you have a parachute, the resistance to your fall is what slows you. The building began to be resisted by what was left, was crumbling, was being crushed underneath. It's very important. Building 7, a controlled demolition. Tower 1 and Tower 2, a planned destruction, planned demolition. It's important that we use the phrases that will bring us to our goal. What is our goal? It is the goal of the family members. It is the goal of those who wish to have the crime solved. A real investigation of the facts of 9/11, the facts that were evident on the day and the facts that have been discovered since. I'm a family member, a distant cousin of Vincent Princiota and Sal Princiota, whose death is a direct result of the crime of 9/11. There are many more family members in 80 different countries. In Japan, 24 people were lost in the crime. All of us, as family members, have essentially one thing that we are asking the public in general. Help us. Help us to get a final, real, open, worldwide investigation of the crime of 9/11, an examination of the facts which have come to light in the years since the crime. Essentially, as they would say in Japan, we are asking, "Tasukete kudasai." Help us. Help us answer the question. Help us find the perpetrator of the crime of 9/11. Thank you.